Welcome to Hyperfixation Investigations, the podcast where two neurospicy best friends take time each Saturday to info dump their research deep dive of the week.
Lovingly produced and copyrighted by Wolf and Stag Productions.
Today's fun fact is, the word solstice is derived from the Latin solstitium, which means point at which the sun stands still.
Good evening, I'm Kara, and I will be leading this week's episode, Saturnalia, How the Longest Night and Ancient Rome Influenced Christmas. This is going to be part 2 of our Examples of Pagan Repurposing in Organized Religions mini-series.
Good morning, I'm Josh, and I'm just along for the ride. For those of you joining us for the first time, how things work here is Kara will be leading us through a mini lecture on the topic in the first half, so that we can discuss today's topic in depth in the second half.
Expect tangents throughout. We switch off duties each week, so for our next episode, expect Josh to lead the way.
Now to our regularly scheduled program. Kara, what have you been hyperfixating on this week?
Today, Josh, we're going to talk about the ancient Roman holidays of Saturnalia and Natalis Invictus, and how they may or may not have had influence on Christmas.
Ooh.
First, we'll look at Saturnalia, and then we'll look at Natalis Invictus, and then finally, we'll briefly cover what the heck solstices even are from a scientific and cultural point of view.
Hell yeah.
And for those of you wondering if we'll continue our foray into Celtic pagan holidays, i.e. Yule, we will, but that's going to be next year's Christmas winter holiday episode, so look forward to that. So Saturnalia is an ancient Roman winter holiday. It starts on December 17th, and that's considered the main feast day. And it's named for the god Saturn, who's associated with sowing, planting, agriculture.
Yeah, sowing.
It is sowing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Who knows?
Yeah, because you reap what you sow.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's literally like the plant metaphors.
Yeah. So the Roman god Saturn is associated with sowing, planting, and time. And his is one of the oldest cults in the ancient Roman polytheistic religion. Again, the main feast is on December 17th. It often included a sacrifice, but the holiday spirit remained for 5 or 7 days following that feast, which is very similar to how our Christmas to New Year's holiday works modern day. The original feast and festival has existed for eons, it seems. And it led to what's known as the peacetime Saturnalia, which is when there was kind of a flip of the script, so to speak, where, for those of you who don't know, ancient Rome had slaves. So slaves were allowed to sit and feast with their masters and had more lax discipline during this holiday. It was meant to be like a time of equality, even though ancient Rome had a very structured hierarchical society. Additionally, gifts were given at this time of year. Candles were lit. So you can start seeing how there are some similarities between some of the more basic tenets of Saturnalia and some of the more basic tenets of Christmas. There were other festivals that followed the Saturnalia feast on like the 18th and the 20th of December, 21st, but little is known about them, and they seem to have essentially been swallowed by the Saturnalia festival when it comes to any historic record keeping.
Okay, like just the records we have are more focused on Saturnalia itself on the 17th.
We know what some of these other festivals are, what some of these other minor gods were that were being celebrated, but the actual rituals, tenets, any of the like specifics of what these festivals were has really been lost.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of speculation, but that's...
Yeah.
The problem is it's not.
There seems to be 1 or 2 main sources regarding ancient Roman holidays, and so that's really where people are getting a lot of this information. Anthropologists, sociologists, what have you.
That's fair, and especially given the length of time that Rome existed.
Right.
Trying to just say, oh yeah, that one holiday that they had for this entire time period.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got to change. So that's fair.
So
easy for things to get swallowed up.
Yep. Saturnalia would typically go from the 17th to about the 23rd or 24th. So leading up to what we think of as Christmas and covering the days that are also the winter solstice.
Right.
Now, there's not a huge correlation from what I've been able to find between the winter solstice and Saturnalia being connected.
Huh.
You can infer some things, right?
Mhm.
Saturn was a god of agriculture. At this time of year, even in the Mediterranean, there would not have been as much agriculture going on. There was the shortening of the days that affects agriculture that has to do with time. He was also a time god. So
Right.
you can see some of these connections to this time of year. And there's even some interpretations of this holiday being when it is because it's in the lead up to the Capricorn time of year in the zodiac, which Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And the zodiacs were a part of ancient Roman culture. So that's something that would have been
Sure.
considered. Maybe not as how we know them today, but this idea of there was a time of year for each god and planets aligned and things like that.
That makes sense. And isn't Saturn usually kind of equated to being the Roman version of the Greek Chronos?
Correct. Yes.
Cool. Because I remember that time association being deeply tied, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
The
And that's
agriculture is less what I remember of that connection, so that's good to know.
Yeah. And yeah, the whole Saturn, Chronos, Greek, Roman, that's its
Oh, yeah.
own whole thing.
Right. There's crossover and there's bleed through, but
Right.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of those main sources that I was talking about is called Macrobius. And I don't know if that's a name or a title,
Oh.
but it's what's referenced a lot throughout different sources that are talking about Saturnalia and ancient Roman holidays.
Is this like a primary text, or is this a book talking about?
It is from the time period. It
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Love good primary text.
Yes. So, as I had said earlier, it starts on December 17th. It lasts anywhere from 3 days to a week. There were gifts given among members of households, special clothing, general merrymaking. And this is specifically, for the most part, talking about Rome. And again, the center of the celebration was a feast. And with this feast, this idea of role reversal regarding masters and slaves, where slaves were able to sit with their masters. It's said that the history of Saturnalia derives from mythology in the golden age of mankind, where Saturn came and brought agricultural practices that increased output to Italy, and that at this point in time, there was equality among all people. So the concept of slavery had not existed yet, which is why this whole slaves are able to sit in equality at the table during this feast is there.
As a way of hearkening back to their time before Saturn
Right.
brought them agriculture.
Right.
Interesting. That just kind of strikes me as an odd callback, an odd celebration of this event,
Yeah.
mythological or otherwise.
And this is the thing about ancient holidays, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, but people who have been raised and educated in a monotheistic society studying polytheistic societies can make it a little bit more difficult for interpretations to be non-biased, and also for interpretations of some of these texts and what we do have of primary sources to be wholly accurate and stuff like that too. There is a fair amount of interpretation going on in all of this.
Because especially anyone nowadays looking at it through the modern lens is going to have trouble looking through those cultural differences and religious differences.
Yeah.
So that's fair. That is tough.
It literally could have just been that, there was a lot of social tension going on in Rome, especially in households, master versus slave. And it could literally just be that somebody at some point was like, hey, if we let them have dinner with us once a year, maybe, they'll stop being upset and the tensions will
that
be
we're
less.
keeping them as slaves.
But yeah, it's Saturn.
But
right? Saturn the god had something to do, So how much...
Right. How much of it is enforcing social hierarchy through religion? How much of it is related to maintaining a not too disgruntled slave population?
Right.
Yeah.
So there were a few customs and symbols for this week-long celebration that cross over with Christmas, or we can see connections to Christmas. One is that Saturn is often represented as an old bearded man. Okay. Often with a sickle or a scythe to represent the agriculture. Often with wings to represent time.
Wings for time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's an old symbolism.
Huh.
Yeah. There's the exchanging of gifts, the lighting of candles, so there being this light aspect at a winter solstice time, for a week-long celebration. Special foods, singing, general merriment, as we had said. The use of evergreen and holly, gold and silver stars, sun symbols, things like this were all a part of the Saturnalia festival, or maybe they were a part of some of those other festivals that, have just essentially gotten supplanted by Saturnalia, because, again, there's not a lot of sources that explain the specifics of those smaller festivals, but
That's
that they
fair.
are in that week-long celebration.
That's fair. And it also wouldn't surprise me to learn, and I mean, I'm just spitballing, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that at least some of those may have been rolled into this holiday from other groups that Rome absorbed, because Rome, being an empire, was pretty well known for just conquering various places and going, yep, you're us now.
Yeah.
You can keep doing what you're doing, but you also have to do what we're doing.
Right. So this festival has gone on for almost 1,000 years. It started in about 497 BCE, and that time, 497, was about 800 years before Christianity became the official religion in Rome.
Right.
It was celebrated throughout Roman provinces and the empire, again, there being a special focus on Rome in the texts that we have. About 40 years after Pope Julius I made December 25th the official date for Christmas, which would have been in the year 350 CE, all pagan Roman religious holidays were prohibited by the decrees of Emperor Theodosian. Many temples were destroyed, and later on penalties became even more severe. People would have their property seized, which in Rome was a huge deal.
Right.
Because that property was how you had citizenship and things like that.
Oh, right.
There could be executions. So these bans ended the overt public practices of the old traditions. But as we talk about, and we'll continue talking about through this miniseries, is they never really go away. They just
of course.
adapt or go underground.
Right. And you said the Pope declared that Christmas was December 25th?
December 25th. Yeah, that happened in, what
350
year was that?
CE, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So in about 390 CE is when all the pagan religious holidays were prohibited.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. So there's another little interesting fact about the winter solstice and Rome, and that is the idea of solstice-aligned architecture. So next year, when we talk about Yule, we'll talk about Irish passage tombs and how those are often aligned with winter and summer solstices. So aligning architecture to different sun and moon orientations is common throughout both Neolithic and historic times.
Right. Great way to mark the calendar just with something you've built and say, oh, all right, sun's passing through that keyhole. Great.
Yeah. There's a really good paper called The Winter Solstice as a Roman Cultural Fingerprint from the Mythical Origins.
Ooh.
By A. Cesar Gonzalez Garcia et al. Really good article. It's free to find. We'll have it on our resources list. That goes into detail about 3 or 4 really prominent buildings in different Roman cities that are aligned with hills that are also aligned with winter and summer solstice lights, either sunrises or sunsets.
Sure.
And that it is likely that major Roman cities did have a certain amount of their architecture being oriented to solstices and equinoxes. It's a lot harder to prove that, and especially in some cities where there's a lot of the old city being built over or things like that, where it's harder to figure that out. But they go into detail about the actual scientific process of how they have figured this out with certain buildings and stuff. It's really interesting.
That's really cool.
I'm not going to get into all of the specifics of it because honestly, it's a little bit hard for my brain to process.
That's fair. But that makes sense, especially given how much work it would be to have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because of how much of Rome, not just the city, but the various cities that they controlled were buried and rebuilt and buried and rebuilt over and over again throughout the course of their empire.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's tough. The layers of city.
Yeah, and specifically, they're talking about buildings that were often either built or rebuilt at the time of Augustus
Oh!
in this one article. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of the overview of Saturnalia, right? We have this big winter holiday that, because of its week-long kind of general merriment vibe,
Right.
even though the feast day is only the 17th, it encompasses the winter solstice, and again, with these connections to time and agriculture, and also then bumps up to what becomes Christmas.
Right.
And these would have been celebrated simultaneously. Once Christianity came to Rome, these pagan holidays would have been celebrated alongside Christian holidays by the different religious groups. So now we're going to move on to the holiday of Natalis Invictus.
Which this one I don't think I've heard of as much.
Yeah.
Like Saturnalia, I've definitely heard of before,
Mhm.
talked about that and Yule on various occasions.
Yeah.
But Nautilus Invictus, you said?
Uh-huh. It's
Okay.
also sometimes called Sol Invictus, S-O-L.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And this was a festival to celebrate the birth of a sun god called Sol. Sometimes there is crossover with the Greek god Apollo. Kind of depends on which cult people were a part of. And for reference, cults were, when you're speaking of ancient Rome or ancient Greece, they were the orders dedicated to different gods.
Right. Not necessarily the modern definition of
Exactly,
cult, where you
right.
think of, oh, a small group of people hidden out in a compound,
Right.
hoarding weapons and just brainwashing people for financial gain and
Right.
whatever else creepy shit.
Households, would typically have a main god that they would belong to the cult of, and then but they was still a polytheistic society. They would follow other gods. They would celebrate other gods in the pantheon as well. People could work for a specific cult in a religious capacity.
Sure.
But again, it was not like I follow the god Saturn, and therefore I don't follow any of the other Roman gods. That's not how it worked.
Right. No, they all got their due. They all got their honor.
Right.
It's just, well, I pay a little special attention to this god over the other.
Right.
Because either
Significance.
familial or cult significance.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's fair.
So this holiday of Natalis Invictus, again, it was to celebrate the birth of a sun god called Sol, and there was also a moon goddess called Luna. That's where it shows up a lot in romance novels, the Sol and Luna thing. But anyway.
Wow, big shock.
Shocker.
Shocker that the romance language
Yeah.
names would get,
Weird.
yeah. Also considering that those are the names that we still use scientifically for the sun and the moon, Sol
Yes.
and Luna.
Right. And often it was shown that Sol was being born from a cave or from the ground. And sometimes it was said that this birth happened in the presence of shepherds.
Huh.
So now we're going to talk about Natalis Invictus versus Christmas, because this is a long-standing debate.
Sure, I'm already getting hints of that with the shepherds
Yes.
thing.
Did the church decide Christmas was going to be December 25th in order to push out the pagan holiday of Natalis Invictus in Rome? Because it was in Rome and during the Roman Empire that December 25th was chosen by the church to be Christmas.
Sure.
So again, this is a really good article where a lot of this following information comes from. It's called Sol Invictus, The Winter Solstice and the Origins of Christmas by Stephen Hijmans. And he did a fantastic job in this article of breaking down why there might be some logical fallacies in the argument that the church chose December 25th specifically to negate this ancient Roman holiday.
Sure.
So there are two different schools of thought when it comes to this idea of the cult of Sol, right? Which would have been the ancient pagan group that regularly followed and kind of celebrated Sol, and therefore Natalis Invictus. And that is that for a long time, there was a theory that Sol was a god brought to Italy and Rome by the Syrians.
Okay.
And that it was brought much, much later into the Roman Empire than most of the other Roman gods. And that it was brought and then discredited as being not a true Roman god, and then brought back under, I can't remember which one they said. but brought back under a specific emperor. And then within like 50 years was supplanted by Christianity.
Oh.
Right. So it's like a 100
That would
to
be pretty quick
200
turnaround.
year thing. And what part of what his argument is against this theory is that it's inherently racist
Mm-hmm.
and completely ignores the fact that Sol and Luna have existed as both gods and goddesses and as very important symbology
Mm-hmm.
in Roman culture for thousands of years. Ancient coins have Sol and Luna both represented on them. They're often considered to be symbols of eternity, of two sides of a coin, quote unquote,
Right.
things like that. And that there have been practitioners and followers of the cult of Sol, and that Natalis Invictus had existed like before Pompeii was destroyed.
Ooh.
You know, so he was like, inherently, this idea that it came from Syria and that it was then supplanted by Christianity just doesn't make sense when you actually look at the history
Right.
of Sol as a god and as a important religious icon and symbol in Roman religion.
Obviously, there's some racist connections in assuming that, well, it's because the Syrians brought it over.
Right.
Which I'm baffled as to that being a weird connection that people go, well, therefore, Sol wasn't actually a thing, even though we have evidence that it was previously in Roman culture for thousands of years.
Right.
I'm curious as to why and how that somehow became supporting evidence for the idea of Christmas taking over
Right.
Sol Invictus, because what I've heard so far,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that doesn't make sense to me here is the timeline of the supposed introduction and reintroduction of Sol despite evidence against that timeline. That's the thing that's really not clicking to me so
Right.
far.
I'm going to read a quote from this because I think it might get into it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So the quote is, Christmas was created by church politics to replace a dangerous pagan feast, Natalis Invicti, the birthday of Sol Invictus, of great significance. Scholars have invariably linked this supplanting of the cult of the sun to the pervasive use of the sun as a metaphor for Christ in early Christian literature,
Sure.
in which he's referred to as Sol Versus or Sol Justite. This position raises serious questions. There can be no doubt that the church fathers who elected to celebrate December 25th as the day of Christ's birth were fully aware of the significance that that day held in the cult of Sol Invictus. The question is whether they chose it because of or despite the pagan significance.
I see. So not necessarily specifically to replace it, but as we are choosing this day, and it also happens to benefit us
Right.
in an additional factor by taking over this holiday. That it may not have been the reason, but it was a supporting reason or just a bonus.
Yeah. He goes on to say, there's a logical connection between the winter solstice and Sol,
Mhm.
hence the feast. But even with the Roman interest in astrological aspects like solstices, equinoxes, and a 7-day solar week, there isn't enough evidence that this date was particularly important to this god celebration. We're going to get into the science of the solstices in a little while, but one of the things that we'll talk about is the fact that, especially at the Mediterranean latitudes, the solstice is one specific day, and you can scientifically figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
But to the naked eye and to the instruments that would have been in use in ancient Rome, it would have looked like the same amount of daylight and the same positioning in the sky for like 3 to 6 or 7 days surrounding the actual solstice itself. So whereas we know December 20th to 21st is usually the solstice, scientifically, it can look like the solstice lasts from the 18th to the 23rd,
Right.
or up to the 25th. So the sun and the short days, yes, these things make sense. He was born on December 25th, and so now the days are getting longer.
Right.
That all makes sense.
Birth of a sun god to banish the darkness. Classic.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of evidence that this day was like hugely important to the Romans either. Like, yes, it was celebrated. And he gets into this, what we had mentioned earlier, this idea that a lot of these theories about Saturnalia, about Sol, about whatever, are monotheistic practitioners attempting to analyze a polytheistic society.
Right. Assigning value to a holiday from a monotheistic lens necessarily is biased towards overemphasizing one god's importance.
Correct.
When it's a feast day, but it's not necessarily the feast day of like the year. It's just, oh yeah, there's a winter solstice like festival. It's birth of the sun god. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it very well could have been the church fathers went, hey, we like this idea of Christ as a light bringer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if Christ is the light bringer, then a birthday around the winter solstice makes sense. Hey, there's already a feast happening on the 25th. If we also make our feast on the 25th to celebrate Christ, then maybe we'll get some more practitioners from Rome into Christianity. You know, it could be as simple as that. There's not necessarily this, we are absolute. There's not enough evidence to say that the church chose December 25th to get rid of or to fully replace or, whatever.
That was not the sole reason.
Right.
That, which you're still doing it at the same time to co-opt believers and worshipers. And yeah, it's not like that's the only reason, and it's not as if that's the entire point or purpose or whatever. It's just, oh, hey, we like this idea.
Yeah.
We're gonna take this idea. Thank you, and it's ours now.
Right. There's this other thing, and this is kind of a tangent into Christian theology.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not do a lot of in-depth research into this, so this is just what I remember from what I was reading this past week. But
sure.
The other thing you have to keep in mind is the birth of Christ on December 25th is the birth of the physical human embodiment of Christ. To many Christian practitioners, especially in like Orthodox Christianities, that doesn't matter. What matters is the birth of divine Christ. When did divine Christ, the spirit, the soul, the power, or whatever that inhabited that physical body for his human years, and then is Jesus Christ, the God.
Right.
To many Christians, that birth, so to speak, or the creation of that divine power is far, far more important than the birth of the physical body.
Sure.
And that is said to have been January 6th, which is known as Epiphany.
Gonna be honest, grew up Christian, did not know that.
Yeah.
Not a clue.
Yeah. So there's also this idea that like, how important at this time was the birth of the physical body of Christ to people?
How important was one or the other to the church at that time when they were making this decision?
Right.
Sure.
And, we have evidence that the physical body of Christ was born in like March or May,
Right. Sometime like mid-late spring.
Right.
No.
So why would they decide on a winter solstice, essentially, a winter solstice birthday? Well, okay, if we now have this symbology of Christ as the sun, he is the sun and the sun, it starts to make a little bit more sense why a winter solstice timed birthday would make sense. And again, there's already this holiday here. People are already expecting to celebrate something in the Roman Empire, so let's just do that.
Oh, yeah.
So...
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So this idea... And again, it's like one of those things that's divided, or at least at some point very heavily divided, the historians and the anthropologists, was, did the Christian church do it on the 25th to destroy Natalis Invictus as a holiday, or did they do it because...
It was just convenient.
Right.
Right, which it does make sense that you just use what you got.
Yes. So I think it's safe to say, right, we've got Saturnalia, that was usually celebrated for a week leading up to the 23rd or the 24th. Then you have Sol Invictus, which again, this is all during that period where the solstice would seem to be in full effect still, where they would look the same in the sky. So yeah, Saturnalia, Natalis Invictus, did they affect what we think of as the Christian Christmas? Probably. How much of that effect was
intentional?
Intentional, and how much of it was like really
Malicious?
Right, malicious and targeted?
Uh-huh.
It's hard to say. There's
Sure.
not enough evidence
Sure, because
to say that.
it's
you
easy
know?
to look back and apply your own
Right.
viewpoint on it now and go, well, obviously this is they didn't know exactly how things were going to turn out, a few hundred years, let alone a couple thousand years down the line.
Right. And you have to think about, too, like the time frame of when Christianity was in pagan Rome
Right.
versus when like Christianity came to pagan Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Different time periods. The
Yeah.
power and establishment of the religious order of Christianity was very different in Rome in 400 CE than it was in Ireland in 700 or 800 CE.
Right. A few extra years to cook.
Right.
Yeah.
And to gain that power and the momentum where they can be malicious because they're powerful enough to do it.
Right.
Whereas they were the new entrants. They were the
Right.
baby religion in Rome at this time.
Right. Because it was, which Roman emperor was it that officially made Christianity the official religion of Rome?
Constantine.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's right. Which that would have been fairly recent still to the church making this decision. I think that would have been like 300 CE or 300 something CE, if I'm remembering correctly.
I'm looking it up. Hang on.
Yeah.
Live fact-checking.
Jinx.
May 337 CE.
337. All right. Hey, the 300s.
Right.
I had the right century.
So 337, and then
Mhm.
the official date of December 25th as Christmas was 350.
Right. So
And
13
then
years.
the banning of the pagan religions wasn't until 390.
Right.
So you're dealing with a 50-year period where these religions not just coexisted, because they would have coexisted before 337
Oh, yeah.
significantly,
Oh, yeah.
but now that's like they're in the phase of both being recognized
Right.
and practiced out in the open by everybody for 50 years.
Right. Where, okay, first one was practiced, one was prosecuted.
Right.
Now they're both being practiced. Now both are practiced, but one is
The official religion.
the official,
And now,
now-
the other ones now.
the one being prosecuted.
Right, exactly.
But that makes sense timeline-wise, especially given the, like a generation or two of people to shift.
Right. So those are the holidays, Saturnalia and Natalis Invictus, and kind of how they connect to Christmas. So now let's talk about the winter solstice from a more scientific-ish point of view.
Yes, my bread and butter.
So, this is from English Heritage, this quote. The winter solstice is the day when, because the Earth's axis is tilted at its furthest point from the sun, means for the northern hemisphere, the sun is at its lowest point in the sky. This results in the shortest day of the year and, of course, the longest night. Now, I will preface the rest of this by saying we are going to have images of all of this on our website. I highly suggest everybody go look at least those, because it's somewhat hard to visualize some of this stuff, I think, without it.
Well, especially if you're not familiar with thinking about the astrological positioning of the Earth
Right.
and the tilt of the axis.
Yes.
It can be a
'Cause
little...
There's a whole thing, right? So Earth is on an elliptical orbit around the sun. So we're going back to like high school level astronomy here.
Woo!
So we're on this elliptical orbit, and the planet is tilted on its axis at like 23 or 24 degrees.
23 and a half, I think, is usually what most people...
Yeah. The poles are not straight up and down if you were looking straight at the Earth. They're tilted. When in the northern hemisphere it is winter, we are actually at the closest point of our orbit to the sun. So that would make you think, oh, shouldn't it be warmer? Shouldn't our days be, because we're literally closer to the giant burning ball of flame? No, because of that tilt, the northern hemisphere is tilted further away from the sun, even though we're closer to it. And that's what produces the shortening of the days and the lower point of the sun in the sky.
Yeah, it's about the angle of the light, not
Right.
necessarily
The
how close you
closeness.
are.
Right. So the opposite's true of the summer solstice, which is why that ends up being the longest day of the year.
Right. And then, of course, it's inverted for the southern hemisphere. So anytime
Correct.
we're talking about our winter solstice,
Yep.
Australia's down there going, it's 90 degrees and sunny. I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So while this solstice occurs on a specific day.
Mm-hmm.
Winter solstice is usually December 20th or 21st. The days just before and just after are almost the same length.
Right.
To the point that in ancient Rome, especially, you really wouldn't have been able to tell the difference even with the technology that may have existed at that point.
Sure.
So on average, there was a week-long period of the shortest days that were only like a few seconds apart in their duration. So as Josh mentioned as our fun fact in the intro, solstice means the point at which the sun seems to stand still. So on a winter solstice, the sun, it's at its least movement point in the year. It's also said, just to kind of harken back to Saturnalia and Natalis Invictus just for a moment, that December 25th might have been the first day people noticed the day being longer again.
Sure.
So that, again, could kind of be what some of the import on that day might have been.
That, again, harkens back to birth of the sun god.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the days are actually lengthening once again.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Also, kind of an interesting little mini tangent on the Roman calendar, because we are on a Roman calendar for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the same calendar that Julius Caesar created 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a solar calendar instead of a lunar calendar, which means that it ignores the moon cycles and instead tried to create a way to stay in perfect sync with the seasonal movements of the sun and the solstices and the equinoxes, not the 28-day lunar cycle that then ended up having like leap month every some odd years.
Right.
The lunar calendars would they would use this leap month to bring the calendar back in line with the sun's positioning, whereas the Julian Roman calendar attempted to just constantly keep you in line with the sun.
Sure.
And so this was another point that added a lot of import to the sun, solstices, and equinoxes in Roman culture, even though Sol as a god and Apollo as a god in the Greco-Roman, important figures and important symbols, but again, polytheistic society, so there were still a lot of others.
Right. Never singular,
Right.
Just elevated, perhaps.
Correct. So the other thing about the solstice, astronomically speaking, other than the fact that it occurs twice a year, is that it's when the sun reaches the farthest north at the summer solstice or the furthest south at the winter solstice, rising and setting points on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're going to have images of this up on the website. Josh and I may also be making models of this, which we will post on the website and on our social medias just for a little bit of fun.
I'm honestly so excited.
Because they're simple to make and they really do. I mean, it helped me tremendously to look at these things when I was researching. Versus, so that's our solstices, right? Versus the equinox.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really important thing with the equinoxes, and that is astronomical equinox versus cultural equinox.
Sure.
Because the astronomical equinox occurs twice a year. It's when the plane of the Earth's equator passes the center of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
We get the even days. In pre-technological cultures, the equinox would have been the date the sun rose due east and set due west of that location. So that means that the equinox date would have been location specific.
Right. So it would shift slightly depending on exactly where on the Earth you were, if that's how you were tracking it.
Yep.
Okay. Because it would hit other people at different times.
Right.
Sure.
Like when it rose and set in Jordan is going to be very different than when it rose and set in Oregon.
Sure.
You know, when you talk about latitudes and longitudes and all of that, right? Those are two very different places on a map. And so their equinoxes would have been different.
Right. But when that's what you have to go on, that makes sense. And that kind of harkens back to the buildings with that intention in mind.
You have to take into account where they are geographically located when it comes to figuring out whether or not buildings are built towards equinoxes.
Right.
Solstices, it's easier. Equinoxes, you have to take into account the geographic location.
Right.
And the fact that it's changed over 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. that article that talks about the Roman solstice architecture has an image of where the sun rises over a hill on the winter solstice now, where it would have been 2,000 years ago when the building was built. And you can see that there's a shift in location. So one of the things about solstices that I didn't realize, and that NASA says a lot of people don't realize, is that the sunrise and sunset locations on the horizon change slightly every day. And except near the equator.
Right.
And that the sun rises on a diagonal. So on the winter solstice, the sun rises as far southeast as it gets and then sets as far southwest. And it's tracked low in the sky, and we have far fewer hours of daylight.
Mm-hmm. Which, if you, during a winter solstice, from the northern hemisphere, if you took a southerly facing time lapse, I think that diagonal arc of motion
shows more.
Yeah, much more obvious and apparent.
Yes. And also that let's see, where was it? Because of the tilt of the Earth that we had talked about earlier, the sun is never directly overhead. So, you're standing outside. It's never going to be directly beating down on the top of your head, even if it feels like it is. It's never 100% directly aligned above you, unless you are at a latitude less than 23.5 degrees.
Right.
The axis angles and all that stuff.
Right, because there's that much tilt, there's that much degree of distance from the equator that you could still get that actual effect depending on the time of year and time of day.
Right.
Right.
And kind of just to wrap it up, something that we saw with Saturnalia and Natalis Invictus, something that we will continue to talk about with later parts of this miniseries when we talk about other pagan religions, is the idea that some cultures feared that the sun would not rise again. When it reached this lowest point, when it was tracking so low in the sky, especially pre-technological cultures, and other people, other cultures and peoples realized it would come back, but that it was going to take a long time. It affected their harvest. It affected all this different kind of stuff. So we see in so many pagan religions, and again, pagan is literally anything but the three major monotheistic religions.
Right.
So we're talking ancient Roman gods, we're talking Celtic spiritualities. Ceremonies are held to encourage the sun to come back and to do those longer days. And many solstice and equinox celebrations have come about in many different cultures and religions because of, the importance of sunlight to people and to agriculture and to all these different things. So that's our main lecture today of the winter solstice and two kind of significant ancient Roman holidays that happen right around the winter solstice and how they may or may not have influenced Christmas.
Lovely. Very fun.
So now let's head over to intermission. Break time! And speaking of breaks, we're taking a break for the holidays. We will not have an episode December 21st or December 28th so that we can focus on celebrating various winter holidays with our friends and family. And we wish you and yours a most wonderful time of the year. We'll be back on January 4th and can't wait to ring in the first Saturday of the new year with you all.
If you have any questions as to our release schedule, it's currently up on our homepage at www.hyperfixation-investigations.com. We'll also make sure to keep you updated on social media and our emails list.
Buzz, buzz. And that buzzer marks the end of our break time, folks. Let's dive into some discussion to round out our exploration of the winter solstice and ancient Roman winter holidays. All right, let's talk about it, Josh.
All right, so I have a couple of, I don't know if nitpicky question is the best way to put it, but I am a little intrigued by Sol Invictus sometimes also being called Nautilus Invictus.
Yeah.
Because normally when I hear the word Nautilus, my brain goes to that little curved shell sea creature that just kind of whoop, whoop, whoop across the seafloor.
That's Nautilus, Nautilus.
Yes.
This is Nautilus, Natalis, as in natal, as in birth.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Natal us. I was entirely thinking ocean-centric. Like, why? How did this...
We watched too many documentaries. Yeah.
Gods.
Yep.
Honestly, you can just blame my fascination with fossils for that one.
Sure.
No. Okay. Natalus. Not Nautilus, but natal. Okay.
Except that sounds like an atrociously Midwestern way of saying the word, so hence Nautilus.
Natalus?
Yeah.
Natalus?
Natalus.
Oh. No,
Natalis
you're right.
Invictus.
You're right. I hate how that sounds.
We've been through way too much vocal training to do that, Josh.
Oh, God. Okay, that makes so much more sense than something vaguely ocean-related that is actually about the sun.
Yeah.
I was genuinely confused and was assuming at first.
I'm sure there are other people that thought that too, so...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was assuming...
It's a good thing to clear up.
Right, well, honestly, I was assuming, I don't know, depending on where they were when they decided this, maybe the way the sun rises out of the ocean from certain angles, that's a thing that they were going for. But the fact that it's more, like natal, like birth, child, that is so much more clear-cut and straightforward. Great.
Glad we cleared that up.
Yes. And then the other thing, I don't know how much information on this you have available to you, but if you know what some of the other gods that were honored and feasted during that week-long celebration were, or like which ones we know and have evidence for, I'd be really curious.
Okay, so this is the journal article Roman Festivals, October to December by Agnes K. Michaels.
Okay.
Volume 68 of the Classical Outlook, published by the American Classical League. December 17th is the official feast day of Saturnalia. Technically speaking, that's the only day of the festival. It's just that it was practiced and general merriment celebrated for a week. So December 19th was Opalia, a feast of the goddess Opes, like the Opiconcivia.
Not the Midwestern saying whenever you are just going to squeeze past somebody. Oh, let me just squeeze past you. Oh my God, that's
hilarious. Should we make that a thing? Anyway.
Oh, God. No. I take it back.
She is identified with the earth, from whom comes the food necessary for human life, according to the Macrobius, who adds the interesting detail that her worshippers make their prayers to her sitting and touching the ground.
Oh.
Mythographers call her the wife of Saturn.
Oh, okay.
So interesting that it comes just a couple days after him. He's agriculture, she's earth.
Sure.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Yeah. December 21st was the Divalia, which was the festival of the goddess Diva Angerona. The image of the Diva Angerona has its mouth bandaged and sealed, and her finger is on her lips.
Ooh. Oh, I've seen that imagery.
Yeah, her name is associated by Modestus with the throat disease angina, which she drives off if a vow has already been made, and also with Angoras ac solicitudes and amorum, which according to Flaccus, she can drive away if she has been propitiated. Essentially,
driving away throat illnesses.
Right. And let's see, where did it say here? The sealed mouth. She would then be another of the spirits who must be kept in good temper if Romans are to prosper.
Oh.
So it looks like she healed different throat diseases too, like strep throat, whooping cough, things like that.
Okay.
So then the other one is December 23rd, the Larentalia. It's marked as a festival for Jupiter.
Oh.
But the connection is somewhat dubious or unknown.
Okay.
It's said that it's a day of sacrifice for the spirits of the dead, specifically for a woman called Acca Laurentia, whose tomb is in between the Forum and the river in Rome. An odd place for a tomb. There was often a sacrifice, which indicates that it was an old and important rite. There are differing opinions on to who the woman was, but it's generally agreed that she was a prostitute.
Okay.
One version says she spent the night with Hercules.
Huh.
And then she left him to be with Romulus, the founder of Rome. Others say that she was the wife of the shepherd Faustulus and the foster mother of Romulus and Remus. Some modern authorities connect the Laurentia with the Lares, but there's no ancient evidence. The one clear thing about Acca Laurentia is that she was not a respectable matron, but then again, neither was Venus.
Amazing.
So those are the other more minor festivals that would have been celebrated.
Cool.
During what we generally think of as Saturnalia.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. See, this is why, like, you can just get so I don't even want to say into the weeds, but just like there's so much minutia to especially like Greek and Roman polytheistic religion and ritual, and it was such a part of their daily life. Almost every day has some kind of festival or feast or ritual that needed to be done in honor of some person who's tangentially related to some god or some hero or whatever.
Right. It's very hard not to just delve really broad while deep diving any of these.
And Josh and I were both the Greek mythology obsessed.
What?
Autistic kids in junior high.
I certainly never had a massive Percy Jackson phase that I have come back to and revisited multiple times, and I'm currently once again kind of in. No. I would never. No. So I always enjoy more Greek and Roman mythology stuff.
Yes.
So thank you for
you're welcome.
Adding on those little details.
It was fun. It was fun to learn about because, like you said at the beginning, I've heard of Saturnalia, but never really delved into it, which seems, I am a Capricorn, so I feel like I probably should have been doing a little bit more research into Saturn since it's, my ruling planet, and therefore in Roman mythology would have been one of my guiding gods, so to speak. That just reminds me, I wrote a personification poem of Kronos and like time as a concept when I was in junior high, and it was actually really good. And now I wonder where it is, because now I want to find it. Anyway.
I'm so shocked. That's not the most you thing ever. Huh.
Like, I think it was published in the junior high District 203 newsletter thing that they did.
Oh, shit. Nice.
I'm sure it's somewhere. I'm sure I have a printed version of it someplace. Anyway, that's completely off point. But, So this is Saturnalia, Natalis Invictus, and the Winter Solstice. And they're vague-ish influences on Christmas.
Right. I mean, at the very least, a bunch of the stuff from Saturnalia has a bunch of aesthetic crossover between holly and evergreen and
a bearded old man.
A bearded old man with gifts.
Right.
I mean, classic.
But yeah, so as we, kind of mentioned in Intermission, we're going to take our own holiday break for a couple of weeks here.
Yeah.
For the various holidays. So we wish everybody a happy Yule, Saturnalia, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever, and any winter holidays you celebrate.
Yes.
And we will see you in the new year.
Until next time.
Bye, guys.
That's a wrap on episode 7, Saturnalia. If you'd like to delve further into this topic, our research sources and related images are posted on our website, hyperfixation-investigations.com. Again, that is hyperfixation-investigations.com. Thank you so much for listening.
Follow us on social media for updates and check out our Patreon to support us directly, join our Discord community, and receive other special perks.
See you in the new year, and remember, what's a little info dumping between friends?